Hi and welcome to Z Games. Recorded live at 4ZZZ Studios in Brisbane and broadcast nationally over the Community Radio Network, Z Games brings you the latest gaming news, reviews and interviews from across Australia and around the world.
You're listening to Z Games, Australia's most beloved gaming radio show. We are coming to you live from the 4ZZZ Studios in Brisbane. You might be listening to us around the nation on the Community Radio Network. I am Lee. Manning the machine, we have Razor.
Hey.
Mr. Jody Macgregor.
Hello.
Candi Payne.
Hi.
And having just walked in, I'm not even, we weren't sure you were coming. Alanah Pearce is back.
Hi.
From the Americas.
I am.
What's it like in the colonies?
Unsafe?
Oh, okay.
Mostly, yeah.
But you escaped.
Yeah, I lived, yeah.
Nice.
It was good.
Excellent. We will talk to you a little bit more later on about the world and things outside of this room. But, Razor, what else is happening on this show?
The Batman.
The Batman.
Yeah. Always love talking about Batman on this show.
Even if he doesn't have a game, just Batman.
Exactly.
He does have a game this time, though, right?
Yes, Batman Arkham Knight is the latest one. A few issues that we'll hear about soon in the news. But Lee, you and I have been playing it. Alanah, you as well?
I have.
And also, Jody, you've been playing Bit Evolution.
Yeah, I have. It's a retro indie 2D platformer. Actually, that doesn't narrow it down at all, does it?
No, that's every...
That's every second indie game on Steam, yeah. Well, it's one of those.
Mm-hmm. And if we have time, maybe we'll talk about Fallout Shelter.
Yeah. Maybe. Look, if there's time, I can talk about it today.
Cool.
Otherwise, I can give it a crack next week.
But, Candi, would you like to kick us off with the weekend gaming news headlines?
No, I'm kidding. Figures released by the Attorney General's Department this week show that 220 games have been refused classification in Australia this year, as new tools for developers to classify their own games for the Australian market have been made available. The trial of the new system, where game developers fill out a questionnaire to determine the rating of the game, officially begins this week, but a backlog of over 150,000 games were classified in preparation, leading to the large number of games that were refused classification in only a few months. If a game is given an RC rating, it becomes illegal to sell or advertise it in Australia. Previously, mobile and online games were not given a rating due to the inefficiency of the classification system that required each game to be manually reviewed to determine the rating. Games that were banned include Douchebag Beach Club, Drunk Driver and Hobo Simulator.
So no great loss there, then.
Well, not when you read those titles, I don't think.
You guys aren't interested in Douchebag Beach Party? What was it called?
Clearly you are.
Douchebag Beach Club? Yeah.
No.
I'm a little interested. I want to know what that is.
Yeah.
Well, I could...
I hear they refine the ideas in Douchebag Beach City.
Douchebag Beach City 2 Beach Harder.
Yeah. That's where they add that open world element. Yeah.
If it was like a Sims kind of game, I can just picture what that club would look like. So I don't feel that I need to play it.
You don't need to simulate that. You can just sort of look out the window.
Well, yeah.
Just go to the Gold
I
Coast.
literally just said go to the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
Yep. The PC version of Batman Arkham Knight has been pulled from Steam and recalled from physical stores after widespread reports of performance issues including crashes, unstable frame rates and stuttering. Publisher Warner Brothers released a statement saying that fixing the game is a high priority, though this will take some time. Unlike the console version, which was developed by Rocksteady, the PC version was handled by Iron Galaxy, the studio responsible for the PC version of Batman Arkham Origins, another game that had performance issues at launch.
That is a significant event, and I don't think it would have happened if we didn't have the recent development of Steam offering refunds. We would have just had to have dealt with this. They might have done some basic patches if people complained, but the significant number of refunds and the very, very angry and vocal people having at it with the Steam rating have caused Warner to actually take a look at this.
Yeah, that's why I think they did it, was because of the Steam rating.
Yeah.
Rather than actually because they think they screwed up.
Yeah.
They were worried it would affect sales, so they were like, well, let's just take it down temporarily, and when it's back up, it'll all be fine. And I don't think it's actually nice of them.
No.
But initially, I was like, wow, that's great. And then I'm like, no, it's not. It's not.
They were actually, in this case, losing money because all those sales that they had, people were able to get that money back. Suddenly they had to take some due diligence with their customers. It's the strangest thing to ever happen in this industry.
And hopefully that's going to be something that's commonplace now. Like the game developers won't put out shoddy games because they're fearful that this is going to happen.
Yeah.
I feel like if you remember like old consoles, the games never really had bugs. I mean, they had exploits, which people have obviously found through things like speedruns, but they were never like, I don't remember a glitch in a Nintendo 64 game ever.
That's just out of
It's just
necessity
now.
because back in those days, you didn't get the technician to come around and fiddle with your N64 cartridge.
Once it was in the box and on the shelf, that was that.
Yeah. So it's just something that is progressively getting worse and worse, and there needs to be some point when it starts reversing.
Yeah. I noticed that Ubisoft recently said that they are going to be baking the PC version of the new Assassin's Creed until it is done, which is the first that we've known that they're holding it back.
Good.
They were originally going to be releasing it alongside the other games.
Was that announced after this Batman
This
issue?
was afterwards, yes. They said, we're actually going to do a good job on the PC version of Assassin's Creed, guys. Don't worry about the refund thing. We'll stop the machine.
It's also a little bit interesting knowing now because we saw like huge discounts for the pre-order, right?
Yeah.
Like there were some really good deals going on, 40% off at Green Man Gaming. Maybe that was somehow related to the fact that they knew they had a shoddy port. Do you think that might be the case?
No, I don't think that's how that works. I mean, Green Man Gaming is like a reseller anyway. So someone in Russia robs a truck and ends up with a bunch of codes, and that's how Green Man Gaming makes money. Like, the Batman could actually stop Steam key resellers if he existed.
Also, I think maybe slightly less litigiously, Green Man Gaming knew they needed to undercut Steam on something big around the time of the Steam sales, and this was the biggest game coming out, so they probably just took a loss on it.
Sorry, Green Man Gaming. I didn't really mean it. But, like with a name like...
The Green Man is going to come for you.
Like,
I don't want to be there when it happens.
I hope the Batman saves me from the Green Man, then. This is going to be great.
I think I saw that episode of the show,
Yeah.
like the 66 version.
Scrolls, the card combat game by Minecraft developer Mojang, will not receive any further content updates, according to a statement posted to the company's blog. Mojang said, "Unfortunately, the game has reached a point where it can no longer sustain continuous development. We won't be adding new features and sets from now on, though we are planning to keep a close eye on the game balance." The developer also said that all proceeds from the game will go towards keeping the servers up and running, guaranteed until at least the 1st of July 2016.
I played Scrolls for a few months. I was in on the beta. Had a lot of fun with it up until a point. It's kind of like a cross between Magic the Gathering and Heroes of Might of Magic. A really cool blend there. But once I got into the point where I was playing semi-competitively, I realized that there was just no game balance there. There was one deck that was focused around depriving the other player of playing, and you had to sort of sit through that, and there was just no fun. So for me, that was the jumping off point.
The other big event that happened since they put out Scrolls is that Blizzard released Hearthstone and sucked all the oxygen out of the room there.
Yeah, and that's an incredible game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Mojang have a lot of money. I'm pretty certain that the sales of Minecraft from one day could probably fund the existence of the servers for Scrolls indefinitely.
Yeah, it could, but now they're owned by Microsoft and they have a spreadsheet that they have to pay attention to. Yeah.
Yes, that's the key thing here.
Paul Sage, creative director of The Elder Scrolls Online, has left ZeniMax just weeks after the game's console launch. Sage has confirmed to have joined Borderlands studio Gearbox as a creative director on an unknown project, though the studio is actively hiring for Borderlands 3. Lead content designer Rich Lambert will replace Sage on The Elder Scrolls Online.
Jody,
Yes.
you play a lot of Borderlands and Elder Scrolls games.
Yes.
Does this interest you?
I am interested in the idea of Borderlands 3 coming out, no matter who is working on it, really. I've been playing the Tales from the Borderlands episodes from Telltale Games, and even though they're a completely different genre, they have still got me interested in playing a new Borderlands game in the traditional style where you shoot people and take their stuff.
What if they made a Borderlands game where not only do you get to shoot people and take their stuff, you also get to put buckets on their head a la Skyrim?
Sold. Money down.
At what point is there too much Borderlands?
Don't ask me that question, or I'll say several games ago.
Yeah, see, that's what I would have said, because they're really similar, right? It's just shoot and loot.
Yeah.
So at what point do you say that's enough Borderlands?
Let's hope it's not the same point they decided with Assassin's Creed. Oh no, wait,
Well,
there's
I'm
more
feeling
of
that
that.
a little bit with Batman now as well.
Yeah.
Call of Duty,
Yeah,
Battlefield.
yeah.
Let's not tug at this thread, guys. Our whole show will collapse if we start going, there are too many sequels in the games industry.
And we have no more content.
Yeah.
Now, Jody, you have been playing Bit Evolution. You described it as an indie platformer. Now,
Yeah.
we'll have to require you to sort of
Narrow that
narrow
down.
it down a little bit for us.
Okay, so this is the retro 2D indie platformer in which you play the ball from a game of Pong who has escaped into the world of video games, and then you travel through a series of worlds, each of which represents a different era of video games. So you start out in like an Atari-looking world, then you go to Monochrome, which is this black and white Game Boy-looking world, then there's like a Super Nintendo style of visual thing, and then you finally make it to like the Nintendo 64 world. And that's where it ends, because I guess that's the peak of evolution if you're into 2D platformers still.
Okay, so we don't go into like PlayStation.
No, that is the end.
Oh.
That is where it ends, right? So
PlayStation 2.
and that's where it ends. It is slightly odd that those choice of those 4 different worlds, because like the odd duck there is that you start in an Atari game, and then from then on it's just like you live in the lands of Nintendo forever. And it plays like a Nintendo game. It plays like Mario. It's the sort of precision platformer where there's no momentum, and so to make a precise jump, you'll have to be sometimes standing halfway over the lip of a ledge. You don't have that sort of Sonic-style thing where you actually build up speed before a jump. It's just about getting in exactly the right spot before your leap. And the gimmick of it, because every indie platformer has to have a gimmick, is that when you die, you go to the world of code. Like you leave the rendered world of whichever era of video games you're in, and you go to this green and black Matrix-style place where everything is laid out similar to the level you were just in, except the enemies are harder, and sometimes there'll be barriers that aren't there in the other world, or there'll be a barrier in the rendered world that you can't get past, and so you'll need to die and go to the world of code and then find a portal back on the other side of it. So there's 2 versions of each level, and depending on how well you play, you'll see like one of them more than the other, which is an interesting idea, but sometimes is really annoying, because if you get to a point that's quite hard in the rendered world and you die there a lot, that just means going to the code world and slogging through it to get back to the point where you were in the rendered world before you try to make that particular sequence of jumps over spikes or whatever. And then you die and you have to do all of that stuff again instead of just respawning on the ledge you fell off and died, which as it goes on, as it gets harder, becomes more and more annoying. At first it didn't bother me, but by the time I was up to the 3rd world and it really started to get tricky, it was just infuriating.
Seems like that would be a really good mechanism to include if you knew, or if you were building your game around being particularly hard in certain areas, and then knowing that people were dying there, you make the alternate path in the world of code to allow people to progress.
Yeah, or even if you could just switch
I'm writing
between the
this
2
down.
worlds more easily. But the fact that to get from the code world to the rendered world, you have to find one of these portals that are quite far apart makes it hard. Whereas in the rendered world, all you have to do to travel to the other one is die. And there are things that will kill you every 5 steps. So that's easy to do. But if you die in the code world, you just go back to the start of the level. So switching between worlds, it's not like Gianna Sisters or one of those other games where you switch between 2 worlds fluidly. It's actually quite annoying to jump back and forwards between the 2 versions of the level.
So
I
it's like-
think I'm lost.
So it's like if you die in this game, instead of just going back to the start of the level, you have to like go to the next house and play the game there. It just adds this extra unnecessary trip to get back to where you were anyway.
Yes.
Great.
That is unfortunately what the mechanic does.
But the first time that you see the code world, it'd be kind of exciting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
just that when it gets repetitive, that it's really bad.
Well, the code worlds aren't any more fun than the rendered world.
Right.
You're spending a lot of time in them if you die a lot. And they're just the same mechanics, the same kinds of jumping and the same kind of pits and enemies, except everything's slightly harder and the kind of neon green and black that gives you a headache if you stare at it forever.
Okay. So it's
Whereas the
basically
rendered worlds look really nice, like
Yeah.
the way that it does the style of Atari graphics, and then like the Game Boy area looks really cute. It's like being in a 2D version of a Pokemon game.
Do they actually, does each era play differently?
Not really.
Oh.
They play very similar. You slowly unlock more things, so by the time you hit like the Super Nintendo world, you can get this anteater costume, which turns you into Sonic the Hedgehog very briefly. Like you gain the ability to curl up into a ball and then roll along and hit things. But the levels are still laid out like a Mario level, so there's not like loop-the-loops you can do like Sonic would or anything like that. It still has that same feel of a Mario game.
So is that how they deal with potential copyright issues? Is they make you an anteater instead of a hedgehog?
Yeah, you're not a hedgehog at all.
So how different do the worlds look?
They do look very different.
But you can still recognize them.
Yes. Like the Super Nintendo world has an area where all of a sudden skeletons start appearing and there are tombstones that will attack you and it looks a bit like ghosts and goblins. Then after that it gets very like Mario and there's like even a princess you have to rescue at one point.
What does she look like?
Maybe slightly pink. You have to like pick a color, sort of an orangey.
It's salmon, not
pinky.
Princess Peach.
Yeah.
Just salmon.
It seems like this means that they have designed 5 or 6 games rather than one. How well did they spread their talent there?
Well, I don't think it feels like 5 or 6 games. It feels like one game with a changing visual palette.
Yeah.
Because although the levels are laid out differently, they do feel very samey. You go from the Atari world to the Game Boy world, and you're still extremely recognizably playing the exact same game.
So is that a good thing?
I don't think so because I wanted the Atari world to feel like an Atari game.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of jarring to have something that plays exactly like a Mario game. Even having the checkpoint on a flag that you have to jump to when it looks like Pitfall or something, I was sort of hoping that it would actually play like Pitfall and then the Game Boy part might play like, I don't know, Bomberman or something. But instead it's very much the same gameplay all the way through.
So all they've really done is just make a game with different levels.
Yes.
Which is not actually uncommon.
No.
And then they've just added in like this parallel hell universe in neon green and black.
Yes.
But it's a nostalgia trip, though, isn't it, for people who may have grown up playing games through all the different eras, from Atari to the 8-bit to the 16-bit?
Well, I think it's very specifically a nostalgia trip for Nintendo players. Like, as someone who grew up with an Atari, I actually found it kind of frustrating that they didn't do the Atari games. They just they stole the look, but they didn't have the feel, man. They didn't have the vibe.
That was Bit Evolution.
Yes,
and you
that's
can get
right.
that for Steam, right, Jody?
Yes, that's
Well,
exactly
now that we've
correct.
talked it up so much.
Now, Ray and Alanah and Lee, you've all been being the Batman, right? You've all been playing Arkham Knight. What have you been playing it on?
PS4 for me.
PS4?
Xbox One.
Huh. And has it been working for you? No glitches?
Performance is great.
I've had a few.
Yeah?
Yeah, just mostly cutscene glitches like people clipping through the ground.
Oh,
Weird stuff like that.
weird.
But no
Interesting.
actual gameplay inhibiting issues.
Yeah, it seems like the PS4 version is the lead version that they spent the most amount of effort on.
Yeah, it's got the exclusive DLCs and stuff, so I
Yeah.
would guess that that's the case.
The PS4 version is technically it's like a tour de force, right? It's probably the best looking game on the PS4 at the moment.
Really is.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. It just the effects, the detail, and just everything all coming together aesthetically. It's amazing. And like on that level alone, it's commendable. But I have some issues with it
Yeah.
that I would like to get off my chest eventually.
So how's that Batmobile?
But first, Arkham Knight
Arkham Knight.
is the 4th game, the 3rd technically in the series as made by Rocksteady. The Arkham series has been about attaching Batman to the game structure of the Zelda series, right? Where you are...
I'd never thought about it like that before, but yeah, kinda.
Yeah, that's it. You in the first one, you were in the asylum and you were gaining tools as you were traveling through the asylum that allowed you to traverse back across the landscape and unlock new areas. And then they added an open world component with the second one in Arkham City. They kind of futzed around a bit with another studio designing the thing for Arkham Origins, and this is Rocksteady's big Batman game for the next-gen consoles. And this is their conclusion to their trilogy. This is them stamping their name on the Batman franchise, possibly with the underside of their boot. It's loud and abrasive, and all of the things that were great about the previous games are excellent, but
Like the combat.
Yeah.
Still great.
Yeah, the
I
combat.
feel like the combat actually might be the best in this one.
Yeah.
Because when you play in these games, you have to time it really carefully. You can't just button mash, and as soon as someone else picks it up, if they haven't played it, you can tell because they just try and button mash. So it's really, really cautiously timed, and there's counters, and you get a warning when to counter. And in this one specifically, Batman, as you're pressing whatever button it is, for me it's X, to jump between punching different people, he just flies so far across the screen.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like the range is just insane, but it's so awesome to watch, and the timing seems a little bit more precise as well. So I feel like that was already fantastic, and they managed to improve it.
And that was something that they kind of pioneered with the first game, Arkham Asylum. That was really new for the time, having a rhythmic-based combat system as opposed to a precision-based one.
Yeah, and it's basically, this has become the standard for fighting games now. This particular style of like timing your blows and then countering and blocking and then being able to throw in special moves once you reach a certain combo level. Like that's how you fight people in video games now.
A lot of things have copied it, but I still think that Batman Arkham Knight specifically does it better than anyone.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yes.
One of the cool things about this is that you have a really large Gotham City. You know, in the first game, Arkham Asylum, you're limited to just the asylum. Arkham City was just a small segmented portion of the city, but here we've got, you know, the 3 boroughs of Gotham to explore.
Yeah, I really like that idea in theory, but again, with this game, like they did with the previous ones, they've come up with a narrative contrivance to ensure that you never really play the Batman experience that you see in the films and in the comics and the cartoons, where Batman is defending the innocent. The city has, in this case...
It's always Batman chasing.
It's Batman in a city that's only peopled with monsters or with people to punch.
Yeah.
There's no innocents walking around there. It's
and
not
they all have really repetitive dialogue.
Yeah, it's not a city that works. It's not a city that has citizens.
That's why I feel like Asylum specifically worked really well, because it made sense because you're in an asylum.
Yeah.
In all of the other games, you're in a city and it just happens that there's only criminals on the streets.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, and it's like it makes sense with the way that the story that they've told here is, but it also denies people once again that full superhero experience. Like you never really do much in the way of saving people. You beat the crap out of a lot of dudes who are bad. But even when you're stopping a bank robbery, it's a bank that the mafia owns anyway, and all you do there is beat the crap out of a bunch of dudes. It feels fantastic, but at no point do you really feel like you are Batman the hero as much as you are...
Batman should just pick another city to live in.
I think everyone should, yeah.
Well, if they're all criminals, they can stay together.
Well, the idea with Batman is that the reason there are criminals is because there's Batman. And the reason there's Batman is because there's criminals.
New York doesn't have Batman, though. It still has criminals. I think they exist
But, like, they go
independently.
crazy because of Batman?
Yeah.
That's a thing. It's an actual thing that they're, like, drawn to each other and they need each other to exist and all that nonsense. But the people, I don't get. Anyone who lives there has no excuse.
That's true.
Like, everyone is a murderer there. Like, and there are so many different ways to get murdered. Like, you would never open a hat store or a museum that would get in, like, Egyptian artifacts with cats. You would never go out on a special holiday. Like, you would just be murdered by the calendar man.
I mean, I thought that you could work in a cafe, but then with Batman and Arkham Knight, when it opens, Scarecrow's just chilling in a cafe, and everyone dies.
Top tourist destination.
And I don't know why these criminals, like these supervillains, are always trying to destroy Gotham. It seems like Gotham is the one city that has the best infrastructure if you are a supervillain. Like, there's a place for you to go if you're caught by Batman, Arkham Asylum.
Yeah.
You know, there's things in place there so that you don't get executed.
Yeah, there's
I
a
think
lot
that's
of...
also a Batman thing. They want the Batman to die, and they want to freak out the Batman. That's what it all is.
Yeah. So this game, again, gives you the massive open world that the previous ones did. And the other ones added the ability to glide around with your cape as a means of traversal. And that was amazing, right? You would shoot your grappling line up and then launch yourself up into space and then float around with your cape out. And it was very, very cool. That was a great way to get around. This game, someone said we need to add the Batmobile because the Batmobile's cool. And then they had to wedge in this alternate means of traversal. The Batmobile,
the Batmobile
is cool.
is cool.
Yeah.
It's just dramatically overused.
Yeah.
When you wait, I need to picture the Batmobile. Do you get to sit in it and you see the dials and
You see it from behind.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's basically when Batman jumps in the Batmobile, you become the Batmobile, and you're controlling it.
Yeah.
And it's more like a tank-style Batmobile that we've seen in Chris Nolan's films rather than the sleek kind of land speed.
No, it's not a car.
Yeah.
It's not a car.
No.
It's not the
Or no
90s
car.
No,
Mobile.
And it can actually transform into a literal tank at the press of a button. You've got two modes. You've got driving mode, and then you've got combat mode. And then in that mode, you get like a rocket launcher, a cannon, and you can also strafe and maneuver really easily.
Yeah.
It kind of makes me think of a spider when you turn into the tank.
Yeah, because the legs, the wheels.
Yeah, but it's also just the way that you move is really smooth, and you can sort of go sideways. And
So it doesn't have fins, is what you're saying.
well, yeah.
Yeah, it does have fins.
Does it?
They just little ones. Yeah.
Oh,
But
yeah, it does.
the Batmobile is fun in theory, and is fun when you first get your hands on it, and you're like driving around the city and smashing through pillars and stuff's going crazy.
And it's so dramatic driving it too.
Yeah.
The noise it makes is fantastic. It drives really, really well. Like you can shoot flames out of it.
Yeah.
It's very obnoxious, but in a really
Yeah.
exciting way.
Yeah, like
And stuff just crumbles as you drive into
Yeah.
it. Like the city just gets destroyed when you take a bad corner.
Seriously,
Yeah.
what is left of this city then? Like,
nothing.
It's just
like
a
it's all
war
just
zone.
Criminals.
infrastructure
Just
and
criminals.
cement and criminals. Yeah, yeah. It's so it's a fun idea that they must have spent a lot of money on making this concept, and then they have to keep putting it back into the game, and towards the end, it just gets obnoxious, and they keep wedging it into new and unpleasant things before you get to do a fun Batman thing.
Sure. Like, my favorite part about the other games is the times when you're in a room and you have to be a predator and kill people.
Yeah.
And it still has that, but it seems like all of the other games, it was mostly that, where you are really cautiously planning who to kill in which particular area so that you can slowly take out everyone in the room without them ever seeing you. And that's so exciting. But this is... They've taken some of that exciting Batman stuff out to replace it with tank battles.
Yeah.
And sometimes it'll be the Batmobile versus 40 drones. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you're just waiting for so long, and you don't feel like Batman, you feel like World of Tanks.
Yeah. Now, we got to get back to that. So in order to make the Batmobile tank thing happen, they've invented a villain who has these robot tanks of his own in Gotham. So it's not like you are fighting the Penguin and his Penguin-mobile or anything. You are Batman in a tank fighting other robot tanks, which is not a Batman experience. That's a different game that they put in here.
Yeah.
And initially it's a cool game, but as you were saying, towards the end you are fighting 40 tanks, and after you fight those 40 tanks, now you've got a forced stealth sequence in a tank fighting other tanks that will instantly kill you if they see you.
Yeah.
God damn those Cyclone tanks.
Yeah.
So many times I walked away from the game just because of those sequences. I just couldn't take another tank stealth sequence.
Oh, God.
And they're just padded out and drawn out like at the start you got 2 tanks to kill.
Yeah.
By the end of the game you got 18 tanks to kill and
Yeah.
it's not 18 times as fun.
I just don't know why they thought it was a good idea.
Yeah.
I really don't understand.
And
They
they
sneak in a tank.
They do it. The other tanks are
Very good
much
question.
louder. Yeah.
Press the crouch button.
Yeah. They keep putting it right when you want to do something cool and satisfying as well. Like, towards the end, the villain is literally like, all right, come and get me. And Batman's like, it's time to finally take this guy down. But first, I'm going to kill 40 tanks and now 8 of these stealth tanks. And after the 40, I was like, thank God that's over. And the villain was like, now it's really time to come and get me. After you beat my other tanks, which you thought you'd already blown up.
Yeah.
But I've got more of these other ones. And I flipped my controller in the air and went away for like a day.
I mean,
I couldn't come back.
Even if the game was only 5 hours long and they took all of that tank stuff out, or even 50% of it out, it would be a better game.
It would be a much better game without all the tank stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be a Batman game.
It would be a Batman game.
Yeah.
I mean, there is the issue of it feeling really samey.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's more of an environment thing than necessarily a gameplay thing. The Batman gameplay is really fun.
The Batman game.
But everything looks the same and feels the same, and I feel like that is because the environment looks the same.
It's a big issue, though, because open world games, part of the joy of them is being able
exploring
to
the open
explore and see things. But
Batman doesn't have that.
No. You travel from one end of the city to the other, and
For objectives.
It's all just the same, like, buildings to punch people in or around.
Yeah.
So to not have that sense that, oh, here's a cool little thing is really a deflating
The world
element.
doesn't have any personality, and I feel like Arkham Asylum did.
Yeah.
And that's why that one was always my favorite, is because it evolved with you as well, and that Poison Ivy comes out, and then things start slowly getting overtaken with trees.
Yeah.
And that was really, really cool to watch that gradually happening.
Yeah.
But these ones are just a city that the only reason that you ever have to cross it is to get to another objective. So it feels weird to complain about them adding in something different when there isn't enough different in everything else.
Yeah.
And if they had have added in something fun, that would have been really good.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
they didn't.
No.
And even as
They tried.
even as like I think someone in the studio thought it was fun, and that's why it features so much, and that's why it's in there to that extent. But it really isn't fun.
Someone was like, hey, if we have our Batman game and we have the Batmobile, then we've just got Batman Grand Theft Auto and we'll make $1 billion.
Yeah. And I think it's because people were crying out for the Batmobile because it is such a huge part of, the Batman mythos. He's got this sweet car.
Yeah.
And so this is maybe them responding to that. And I think in the end, it's like, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, because the Batmobile in the lore of Batman exists just so that Batman can get from the cave out of town into the city and then carry people around between then, right? Most of the time, he's already up on top of a building about to leap down on someone, and they've already got that in the game. But they don't have you travel the 7 miles between Wayne Manor to Gotham City, because that would be incredibly boring.
That would have actually been really cool, though.
Like
if
what?
you had like a home base that you could like go to, and there were like side quests there.
Yeah.
That would have been sweet. Maybe I just want everything to be The Witcher, though.
Yeah. Well, that's
So that's a thing.
like going back to The Witcher after this makes me love The Witcher even more, and I love The Witcher more than like all of you combined. I would push off a cliff if The Witcher were
Yeah, got
in
it.
peril.
Yeah.
I dyed my hair grey because of that video game.
Yeah,
So
nice.
that happened.
Yeah. And returning to The Witcher, which allows you to just stop and travel around the town at your own pace, and then maybe go into a bar and
not
play
just
cards.
get beaten up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a different environment. Like, that's actually...
That's open worlds. That's what I think of as open worlds.
Yeah, it's a pleasant place to explore, whereas this is just so oppressive.
It is.
Yeah. We've been ragging on it because the negatives are just so in your face that
Well, I
it
think it's that
distracts.
it's disappointing.
Yeah.
Largely, it's another hype thing where I was like, this is their final game. Surely it's going to be excellent. All the other Batman games have been fun, and having this shoved in your face constantly, this goddamn tank, is just so disappointing.
Yeah.
But still, I think that even the addition of the unfun Batmobile doesn't detract from the fact that this is overall
It's a good game.
a good
Yeah.
game.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk about that more when we return from this song, which is Sarah. Jody, what's this one?
This is from Dragon Age Inquisition. This is one of the songs you'll hear in the taverns.
This is Zed Games talking about Batman Arkham Knight. Now, we have spent a large amount of time talking about what we didn't like about the game, how the Batmobile sucks.
Yeah.
But like I said before the break, I really enjoyed this game, mostly due to the strength of the narrative. I found myself really pushing forward just because I knew that this is like a really exciting chapter in this Batman storyline.
There's a lot of cool stuff that happens that we cannot talk about at all because massive spoilers. But if you trust us when we say that the best things about the previous game are on display here and they are better than ever, that's what we can say. That the story of Batman's journey here is really interesting.
You also don't really need to play the others to play this one.
No.
If you haven't, you don't. I highly encourage it, but you don't actually need to.
You might get a bit disappointed, though, if you
Sure.
then get to this one.
Sure.
So does it have those hallucinogenic sequences like the Scarecrow stuff in the first game or the Mad Hatter bit in the second one where
Yes.
you get drugged and then crazy stuff happens?
Yes.
Good.
That's the whole thing.
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Scarecrow. It's just really hard to talk about, but Scarecrow's a big bad guy.
Yeah.
Big relevant bad guy.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of hallucinating, which I loved in all the others as well. So I was so happy for that to return.
Yeah, Batman trips balls through the whole thing.
Really?
Yeah, and it
It's
still
my
feels
favorite.
different though. It's,
Oh, yeah.
it's approached in a totally different way. It's not in the same way, like in Asylum specifically. It would always end the same way. You'd trip out a little bit, and then you'd have this weird like stealth sequence with the giant Scarecrow that happened every single time, but they mix it up, and there's a nice amount of variety, and every time it's exciting and creepy.
Yeah. And it escalates in a really interesting way as well. So by the very end, the way that you interpret even the environment changes quite a bit. One thing that I really like about it is something that's actually quite subtle, because the game does hold your hand a lot of the time, and a lot of the puzzles you're like, oh, here's a cool thing where I can, possibly use this interesting new tool in a fun way, and then it says, no, you have to use this one. But then when it lets you just solve problems however you like, it's really amazing. So as an example, towards, I guess about 3/4 of the way through, you get these drones flying around guarding the skies over Gotham, these big robot hovercraft things that have a searchlight that will machine gun if you fly near them. And I looked at those and thought, well, probably I'm going to deal with those in the story, because that's how this game tends to introduce things, and then it has you do a mission to deal with it, and maybe I'll get a new toy to deal with that as well. But in fact, all of the cool Batman tools that you've got that already work on electronics and robots affect this thing. But not only that, I discovered that you can just land on top of them if you're pretty skillful and blow it up while you, after you sabotage it and then leap off, and you can blow it up as you're plummeting back to Earth.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
It's the coolest thing. And it's just, I already knew that maybe the cool toys that they'd already given me would interact in that way. And yeah, and that's a fun thing you can do. And then I was like, is that the only way you can do it? But no, you can shoot them out of the sky with your tank. That's... Every toy works on these amazing drones, and it never tells you that you have to deal with them. Yeah. It's just a problem to solve.
There's a lot of cool sequences where you're just thrown into this huge room and you've got all of your bat gadgets, and it's like, how do you do it? There's no way prescribed to do it. You just have to use your own.
The game's sort of just bring it on.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the best thing about Batman is his arsenal of awesome gadgets, like the Batarang, That's
the first one you mentioned? How sweet is this metal thing?
Batarang.
But it's shaped like a bat.
Now, what about the remote-controlled Batarang?
That one I like.
Yeah.
Yes, that is good.
What's the... Okay.
One's just... you have to go pick it up again afterwards.
Oh, remote-controlled comes... Sorry, it's not on a remote control. It just comes back to you.
Well,
no,
you control it.
You can control it.
Oh.
It's like a drone Batarang.
Oh.
Yeah, it's really,
So you
really
just
hard
keep
to
it
use.
going.
But you use it for solving problems, like getting through a grate and then attacking something that you couldn't reach yourself.
Yeah.
So sometimes you'll be stuck somewhere and be like, I have no idea what to do here. And then you're like, this might be time for my trusty remote control Batarang.
Yeah.
And it is.
Yeah, so all the favorites are back from the previous games, but you've also got a couple of new ones.
Yeah.
Should we reveal them now or wait?
I feel like no.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're bat-themed things that do stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is really all you want.
Anti-shock bat repellent.
There
isn't any anti-shock bat repellent, and I find that so disappointing.
There is one that is really weird and seems needless, like something that they could have just shoved into another thing, which is that you've got a gun that when you pull the trigger, it talks in the voice of whoever is in charge of the goons. And the first time you get it is you get it when you're fighting Harley Quinn. So you have a gun that when you pull the trigger, it says, "Hey, Puddin'." That's it. That's what Batman spends his billions of dollars on.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'd buy it.
Well, yeah. That would be an amazing piece of swag. But maybe a super sci-fi ninja doesn't need
Maybe
that.
not highly relevant to the Batman.
What's the dialogue like? Do you get sick of hearing voices and... I don't know why. That's always a big one for me. Whenever there's any fighting and stuff, do you kind of hear the
They're
same
repetitive.
loop of
Same person,
comments?
even. A lot of the thugs are voiced by the same person and a lot of the same lines, and sometimes if you pause the game for a while or you just leave it, you'll hear the same lines over and over and over again. But even as a blanket, the whole game, this one is quite cheesy.
Yeah.
In a way that I can't hate because it's Batman.
Yeah, and I've never minded the cheese so much. It's just when it becomes repetitive, and I find that in superhero games.
Yeah.
You get the same lines, and they're all funny the first 5 times you hear them, and then you know what's coming, and
It's quite responsive though. As the game changes, as things happen, you get different dialogue coming through.
Okay.
So if you are,
it's not the same throughout the whole game.
Yeah, if you are pursuing the thread, you will hear different chatter, but the fact that it is all the same guy, there's just one really shouty guy that Batman's listening to the whole time through, who's just like, "Hey, I can't wait till the Riddler shuts up." He's just that guy. I wish
Speaking of the Riddler,
oh God,
for some reason he thought it would make sense to have races
Yeah, like that's
there
his
are these
riddle.
races
Yeah.
for the Riddler, and I'm like, in what universe does the Riddler design races?
And he calls them his riddles, but it's not.
And it's not a riddle, it's a race.
It's a racetrack
is-
with saw blades.
Yeah, if it's set against a clock, it's like...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really weird. And apparently you can unlock the true ending of the game by getting all the Riddler trophies and by completing all of his stuff, but...
Will you do that?
Well, no, because YouTube, but also
Yeah.
because I'm not going to like sit around racing
Yeah.
for that. It's just no, how dumb.
I completed his races and I wanted to hurl my PS4 into the street after the last one. It's so painful. And then every
I
time
can't
that
believe
you
did
lose,
them. That's crazy.
every time you lose, he's there taunting you, and he has transformed into this magnificent, like, men's rights activist guy, this total Twitter troll. Like, he's just there taunting you, you know, and working through a lot of issues of his own, I guess. But it's just completely unnecessary. You know, like, it's a cool idea, but
Yeah.
when the deck is rigged in his favor so much, all you do is you're just sitting there watching the Batmobile explode while
Yeah.
an internet troll shouts rubbish at you.
I just don't know why they messed with it because the Riddler stuff in the other games was great.
Yeah.
Are these races like a little bit separate? You know, if you damage the car or yourself or something during this, does that come back into the rest of
Nah.
the game? Or
Nah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's separate.
It's just another thing.
Right.
He's kidnapped Catwoman, and you have to do a bunch of races and solve some pretty fun puzzles in order to...
Why get her
get-
back in? Why?
Because
Just leave her there.
they're doing it.
Wait, do you
Yeah.
get to play as Catwoman like in
Yeah.
Arkham City?
In a
Yeah.
little bit in
Oh,
those
okay.
sequences, but nowhere near enough.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, you get to play as a bunch of other characters as well. Like sometimes other...
Robin, Nightwing.
Yeah, those
they're
guys.
there.
All of your Batman favorites, they'll pop in, and then all of a sudden you'll do a tag team move where you sort of smash the bad guys up together, and then all of a sudden you're playing the other character, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
You get to be Robin.
Yeah, the Robin sequence is probably the highlight for me.
What's Robin like in this?
Got a really militaristic
Mini
haircut.
Batman.
I'm going to say
Really?
Chris O'Donnell, circa
Is-
Batman and Robin.
Yeah, yeah.
He is, so he's all like holy rusted metal Batman. He's all that kind of...
No.
No.
He's an angsty teen,
just
isn't he?
aesthetically
In the
speaking.
Well,
second
He's a
not
little bit of an angsty
He's,
teen.
he's not a
just a
teen,
bit of
though.
a-
No, he's not a teen.
he
He's
is
just got
definitely-
attitude.
He's like
He's a
28.
grown-ass man,
Yeah.
but he's a little bit angsty.
Yeah, but everyone treats him like he's a child.
Bummer.
So that's Batman Arkham Knight, which
Yeah.
is an amazing game sandwiched between an awful tank game.
Yeah, and I think the criticisms do come because everything else is so good. So it's such a letdown. It's still totally worth playing.
Have a friend play the tank stuff for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll
Don't.
make a DLC where you can take it all out.
Oh man, the first PC mod that removes the tank stuff. Oh, it's gonna be great.
Yeah.
Well, that's about all we have time for this episode of Set Games. We'll be back next week at the same time.
Yeah, more stuff. Fallout Shelter next week.
Yeah, we didn't have time, unfortunately.
That's cool. I'll talk about it next week. I'll have had 7 more days of looking at my dwellers.
All right, see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.